Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. Wayne, welcome to this episode of Leadership Bites. Brilliant to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And obviously, I know who you are because I've invited you on. But just for those that are listening, it would be great just to get a sense of just the role that you inhabit and what it is that you do for your day job.
Great. My day job is I'm a Texas Ranger company commander for the Texas Department of Public Safety. I'm stationed out in El Paso, which is the furthest west point of Texas. It's Region 4. It covers a pretty big area of West Texas, and I see the day-to-day operations of the Texas Rangers activities. We do major crime, major violent crime. We do a lot of officer-involved shootings, custodial deaths, corruption, any major felony, mass casualty events, terrorism, and border security. So we oversee quite a bit of our police function here in Texas, but on a significant scale, on a more serious scale from day-to-day policing.
Yeah, and that's an easy thing to say, but I can only begin to imagine that there's a huge amount of complexity involved in it. And I'm also really alert to the fact that I live in the UK. So I grew up with films where people went, when's the Texas Ranger coming? So I'm just really alert to I have that awful caricature in my head of the fact that, or maybe not, but that is playing with me a little bit.
Well, that's funny you said that. A lot of times we do get the call when it's the most dire of consequence and dire of circumstance. So Texas we turned 200 years old in a year and a little bit over a year. In 2023, the Rangers will be 200 years old. And so we're really excited about our bicentennial coming up. And that's how long we've been performing various functions of police and security and kind of a military force when we first started, and border security. And it just kind of evolved. But we're going to mark our 200-year anniversary here very shortly.
I've been to Allen, Texas, and I spent a few weeks there. And I just remember how incredibly hot it was. And I remember I was about to leave the hotel, and the lady, the receptionist, said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm just walking to the building over there." She said, "Oh, you need to get a cab." I went, "No, I can see it. I'll just walk over there." She went, "Well, it's up to you." And I walked out, and of course my shirt just condensed. I just sweated immediately. I walked back in, and she went, as I said, I just wasn't used to that level of humidity. It absolutely blew me away. But go on, sorry.
Now the cowboy coat is, the felt hat in the fall and the straw hat in the spring and summer. And I find that most Rangers wear out a straw a lot faster because it just doesn't get that cold to wear a felt. But to be true to the code, in September, the felt hat comes out and it's just still hot. And especially in El Paso in South Texas, the weather doesn't accommodate that felt hat. Sometimes it does get hot.
So listen, I do want to bring up one thing that it's just jumped into my mind. So if you want to shake your head and we edit this out, I really get that. But I've got this memory of, I think it's a statue and one riot, one ranger. Have I got that right? There's or have I got that way around? Well, there's a story.
No, there's a story to it. And I pride myself on my Ranger history, so hopefully I don't misquote this story too awful bad. But there was a boxing match that was set to take place, and something about the boxing match that it was going to create problems or whatever. So they sent the sheriff and local officials asked for the Rangers to come in and disperse the crowd and do away with the boxing event and venue. And so they waited wherever at the bus or train station, wherever he came in at. And so when he got off the train or bus or whatever, the sheriff or local officials said, well, that's just one of you. He said, well, there's only one, there's only one fight. So there's only one ranger. And so that kind of morphed into that saying. Now, I hope I didn't butcher that too much. I'm sure some historian might correct me on a few finer points, but that's the gist of the story. When he got there, the locals were underwhelmed with the amount of force that showed up. And then that kind of took off from there with that quote.
It's a beautiful thing. It just tickles me whenever I think about it. So I think that's it kind of sets the tone a little bit. And I guess there's something about a role, and then there's something about the history that sits with it. And when I think about, because I work with organizations, I do leadership, and when I talk about culture, and there is something about living up to something and maybe the weight that goes with that. And I just wonder how that plays out, as in people, the aspiration. Maybe it's like wanting to be in special forces or something like that. I don't know what it is, but how big is the history to the role?
That's a really insightful question and extremely relative. So we promote from the ranks of inside the department and our organization. Like before 1974, we could appoint rangers from outside the department, but since about the mid 70s, they made a rule that all our ranks come from our trooper entry level, and then you just promote up through the department and organization until you're eligible to become a ranger. But even myself included, when I put the badge on and went to work, I had ranger friends, and I kind of knew what the work was about. But I think a large lion's share of our personnel underestimate the weight of the badge and the weight of the responsibility and the 3 a.m. phone calls and the urgency that comes with it. And our chief always says, when we promote, he always tells the person promoting, today's the last day you'll ever be caught up with your paperwork and your case files, because it's so much. And then everything we get into, especially with use of force situations, officer involved shootings and homicides, the major crime, someone's life is in peril. You know, someone suffered the worst tragedy they could suffer. The stakes are always so high. So you have almost a double-edged sword there, a twofold problem. You have the weight of the legacy and those that came before you that didn't mess it up. And then you have the role and responsibility you have to fulfill to precision. There are no mistakes. It's just in our culture, like you talked about, in our culture of an organization, mistakes are few and far between. And when they come, they have heavy consequence. So in all kinds of ways. So the mistakes are just, we're not in that kind of business where we can make missteps and forget things or miss a opportunity. It's just extremely demanding. So I think it's funny you mentioned that. When everyone comes in, they are enamored with the legacy of it. Obviously I was, but then once you get into it, you realize, wow, the stakes are really high with this job. Things kind of change, and then you evolve into that aware, self-aware person that can perform and function as a Texas Ranger and be the guy that shows up to, I'll use the mass casualty events. For instance, we had Sutherland Springs, the church shooting in Texas. There was almost a third of our division was at that crime scene, working that scene and putting the pieces of that tragedy back together. And it's when it happens big for us. So, but the state of Texas are used to seeing that. The same thing with the mass casualty event in El Paso before I was the company commander out there, the Walmart shooting. We try to be good partners to our local law enforcement and federal counterparts and be good team players and put together a product that gets the bad guy in jail for good. And so hopefully that lends credibility to the legacy for the next 100 years or 200 years, hopefully.
So there's something there about the weight of what's gone before, but then also recognizing that because of what's going on in the real time, you're creating your own legacy, and there's a narrative that's being created, and the stuff of legend, I guess, is being created now, but you probably don't see it like that because you're just cracking on doing your job, I think is what I'm hearing there.
Yes, sir. It's a perfect way to put it. You're in the moment. And it's hard to take stock and think, wow, I'm leaving a footprint. So I try to remind others, that, hey, it's, the reputation that goes with it. That's all you take with you when you retire. You don't take anything else. You take a reputation. And so hopefully if you just keep that in mind, everything else will fall into place, because the work and prestige and the tragedy and the seriousness of everything will always be there. So
it's an interesting one. I talk about this idea of legend, and I always have to be careful about it, because in the UK, I don't know if it's the same in the US. You can kind of say to somebody, wow, what a legend, as in saying, just, maybe a sign of respect. But often in leadership circles, we talk about the story and the narrative, and those are almost in the moment kind of ways of thinking. But I often think, I like what you said, did you say the only thing that you take with you, what did you say when you leave?
A reputation.
Reputation. And I am, and maybe I'll change it to reputation, because I kind of have this idea of, if you're working towards the legend of you, and that doesn't necessarily mean in a grandiose way, but there is really, when you're in your 80s, or in your, if you make it to your 90s, on your reflections, you've really only got what you've done that sits with you. So I think, I've got that sense of that weighing heavy, and that's really fascinating. What is it that, as a matter of interest, do you have a sense of the public's relationship with a Texas Ranger being different to a different law enforcement entity? Do you think there's a perception there that maybe filled in caricature because they've seen Texas, Walker Texas Ranger with Chuck Norris or whatever it is? Is there a public perception that differs, or is it no, they just see law enforcement as an incumbent whole? Do you think there's a sense of that?
We enjoy a lot of recognition, favorable recognition, and a governor that's very fond of us and our effectiveness. There's a very stark difference in how I'm treated at a restaurant or public venue when someone sees me versus another officer. Texas is very fond of their Texas Rangers. As a matter of fact, there's a law that was enacted, I think in the early 90s, that we can never be abolished. So
best job ever.
Ever. So Texas takes their Rangers very, very seriously and affectionately. But as far as being counterparts to our law enforcement brothers, really, I hope, humbly speaking, we're shoulder to shoulder with them. There's nothing that sets us apart other than the badge and maybe what we do for a living, and maybe some of the significance of the things we get into. But we're hand in hand with all of our law enforcement partners. But to answer your question, yes, sir, there's a difference, a stark difference in how I'm treated versus other officers. And it's iconic, right? So like the black tie or dark tie, the white shirt, the white hat, and the gear that goes with it. The firearm is very personal and ornate and designed. Some guys wear just a regular pistol, and some guys like an old traditional 45. And so people in Texas recognize that iconic, those little signatures there, so to speak. And so anyway, to answer your question, Texas is very, very friendly and fond of the Rangers. And we appreciate that. We know that's all predicated on trust and value and integrity. And it's been earned. It hasn't been just given. Hopefully we're not riding on the coattails of that 200-year history. Hopefully that the public, and I believe they do see that our hard work and devotion and the culture of our organization is perpetuating that legacy and deserving of that image and respect.
So in a time of social media where if you walk down the street, somebody can take a video of you and, post it. Anybody in a public space is on high alert to the fact that it can turn up on a social media platform 15 seconds later. It could even be live streaming, let alone, I guess, anything else. So I think I'm hearing there is that I wouldn't use the word precarious, but it might be, because it only takes one bad person to mess it up in terms of brand. And I guess there's an awareness around that now that back in the day, you know, if you took a misstep, you could probably course correct it quite quickly. But if we make it now, it travels the globe before we even might realize what's gone on. Does that sort of factor into thinking?
It's funny you said that. There's a saying that when you come into the Rangers, you can't do anything to add to it, but you can do everything to tear it apart. And I think that's holds true. You know, the legacy is as solid as it can be, but you are right that hypervigilance of your conduct, your words, your actions, you have to maintain that, especially today as adversarial as it can become quickly. And that's what I was going to say earlier too. I meant to mention that unfortunately for the Rangers and most law enforcement, I'm not the face of something positive. When I talk to people or something's happened and I have to make a next of kin or death notification, or I have to tell them how the investigation's going for their loved one, I'm the face of the worst tragedy they've ever suffered. And so that's the very unfortunate position law enforcement is in. A lot of times we're bringing some real bad news and to be the bearer of bad news, I don't want to say kill the messenger, but so it's very complex now in today's law enforcement to be the face of that tragedy, and then to have that awareness in the moment and that composure, and that you just have to have a dignified, competent. That's a word I really like to use when I talk about the law enforcement today. It's just if you have a dignified, competent, and rational, professional demeanor and response, that social media thing and getting hyped up or getting brought into a situation that looks unfavorable or where you lose your cool, that won't exist if you pride yourself on those and anchor yourself to those things, especially the composure and competence. And so, yeah, it's different though. I mean, it can happen quick. In a moment's notice, you can be lulled into something that'll make you look bad. Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully, most strangers, if not all, are aware of that and are careful. And as our whole department really has a culture of good relationships with the public and the media, but a vigilant one as well, where we are very self-regulated. And that professional standard is really touted and pushed as a superior organization. With our colonel, he came in about, I guess 10 or 11 years ago, and he's been really good for our department, as the other colonels were, but the professionalism and the standards are emphasized, and that expectation for conduct and especially in the face of extreme provocation that you maintain your professional standard.
So I'm interested in some things I'm hearing there around. I mean, I love this idea of the words you don't hear a lot of: dignified, composure, self-vigilance. I mean, these are, I think words have power. What's the kind of the youngest that you can become a ranger? Is there something there that says, look, it doesn't matter how, it's not about your intelligence. There's something here about you got to have lived a little bit.
So all the Rangers, I was just thinking about my guys in West Texas. They all have something. None of them have the same thing, the same skill set or the same talent. They all have something unique and individualistic about them that make them a superior and outstanding Ranger. So you can come into the department when you graduate recruit school, you need to be 21 years old. So we get some college, we'll get a military person that's transitioning out of the military service. You can qualify on prior police, college, or military service. So the youngest I've ever seen is about 29 or 30, but it's a double-edged sword with those recruitments, because that 30-year-old, I know one very well. He's extremely young and can run circles around most investigators. He's extremely motivated and obsessed with the work of a Ranger. And I think it takes an obsession to be good at your job. You just have to be really immersed in the whole experience of what you're doing and the proficiencies that you develop. And so with our department and the training we receive, especially in the Rangers, you can develop those proficiencies. I always say when we hire someone, we can teach everything but initiative. And so as long as they have initiative and some interest and energy to do this job, then they're a viable candidate. Someone that's not motivated or a good self-starter, they may have all the experience in the world, and they may be, my age and extremely capable, but if they're not motivated and have no initiative, and two, I need to circle back to our organization. It's not a big organization. We have an authorized strength from the state legislators give us our authorized strength numbers. We call them FTEs, positions. We're only 160 strong, maybe just a little bit north of that, and there's 254 counties in the state. So you don't even have a ranger per every county. And then within that 160 allocation of positions, you have maybe 30 to 40 command staff. I think there's 17 or 18 lieutenants in the state. There's 8 that do what I do as majors. There's 2 in Austin, and then the rest are spread out throughout the state. So we're not top heavy, but nevertheless, I think about 112 or 15 in the field, pulling the plow, doing the work of a ranger. So to have that when you talk about the skill set or the age or the talent that someone brings, it's crucial we make a good call on that, because we just can't afford, with those small numbers, it's almost like an NFL team. We can't afford a guy that's not up to performance and standards. So our recruitment is pretty strict when we go to put on a new guy for a new position.
And in the time that we've got, all these things are big topics. But what is the recruitment process? I mean, is there a kind of X amount apply and only X get in, or actually very few people bother applying because they don't think they can get in? Or
well, but when I promoted into the Rangers, it was a statewide recruitment. So you would go to Austin, you would take you qualify through your work record. You have to have at least 8 years experience. You can have as little as 4 with the department, but you need 8 years of law enforcement experience to qualify for the test, to take a written test for Ranger. You'll take that written test. When I applied, I took the written test, and then you went and did an interview board, appeared before an interview board at Austin and at our headquarters. Now we have reorganized that effort, and now those promotion boards are held regionally. So when I held my promotional board, it's just for my area, and you kind of, back then you didn't know where you were going. So I was stationed in Laredo, which is South Texas. And then when I got in, the chief, called and said, "Hey, you made Ranger, you're going to go to McAllen." And they just told you where you were going to go. Well, now we've kind of softened up that recruitment a little bit, where now when you put in for a position, about where you're going to go. So because a lot of folks have families and jobs, and their wife or spouse or husband works somewhere. And so they want to stay geographically somewhere suitable for their personal life. So now they can apply regionally. And so if they want to stay in West Texas or North Texas or South Texas, he or she can just test for that region and stay local. So once you test and you interview, I think we usually get about 10 to 15, sometimes 20 applicants. And then, out of those 10 or 15 or 20 applicants, half probably need a little more time, and then half are really good. And then it's very hard to even pick the Ranger. And then for lieutenant and captain in our promotions, it's just a razor thin margin that separates these selections. So we're very lucky. DPS has an abundance of talent and ability and skillful people putting in individuals that want this job. And the margins that separate their brilliance are just razor thin. The last board I had, there were 3 to 4. I can remember 3 that were just outstanding, and it was an excruciating decision because I only had one position. I had over 10 applicants, and 3 or 4 were just, they could do the job tomorrow. And it just it's very tough to select a Ranger because we just have so many talented, qualified candidates to choose from. It's tough.
So in all roles, there isn't a role in the world where somebody doesn't fail, I guess. And when it doesn't work, when somebody, just salesperson, customer service, doctor, when it doesn't work, why hasn't it worked? Because if the record's there and the desire to join is there and the recruitment process is pretty strict, and yet every now and then, be it 1 in a million or whatever it is, somebody's just not going to work out. When it does go wrong, why does it go wrong?
So there's two answers to that question, and one's probably not a real talked about or embraced philosophy or thought process. Okay, so when the Rangers, our culture does not allow. We don't have a tolerance for that. So, like, if there's an individual that's struggling and not doing well, and having some adversity, a senior Ranger, someone with more experience that's been there, will partner up with that individual and that Ranger and work a little more alongside them and kind of steward and guide their career path.
Counsel, mentor, those kind of.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Their development. We have our senior guys are really good about developing that rapport and having that credibility with the newer guys coming in. So we're pretty quick to spot a stumbling block or something that someone may have to, because, like I said, we usually promote, the most capable, ambitious and energetic and enthusiastic candidate. So really, the skill set they receive from us with the training, there should be no reason for failure. And then I think it's just really important for the culture of an organization to have that ownership and that accountability with each other, where you're developing and preserving and measuring up and living up to the expectation. We talked earlier about, the citizens of Texas and their view and image that they hold of the Rangers. So we're aware of that. And I just think to let someone falter and fail, we're very cognizant of not letting that happen. But the elephant in the room with that statement is, when it's all law enforcement, is the coping mechanisms, the vices that law enforcement gravitate to deal with the stresses of the job. And sometimes it's alcohol or another negative habit or outlet so we're really trying hard to emphasize work-life balance, family. Our chief and our colonel is really big on that. Having that time with the family and being connected to your anchors in life, and so that way, I think some organizations and agencies, they emphasize the work over everything else, and then to compensate for that or to cope with that, law enforcement is not above it. That alcohol and drinking can cause catastrophic things to occur in your career. So that, to me, is not just exclusive to the Rangers, but anyone in law enforcement. The vices you gravitate to cope are a conscious choice, and our culture and our organization and the department has tried to gravitate towards more positive vices that can balance you out and make sure you survive a career in law enforcement. It's very hard on you emotionally and physically. And then if you have a negative coping mechanism to go along with it, we used to see it all the time. A guy would retire at 52 or 3 and he's dead by 62. He made it 10 years. So we're trying to change that, and we've made some great strides in that, and it's really turned around. I came in law enforcement in 1993. There wasn't even video cameras back then. They just now started putting the video in the car, I think in 94 or 5. So I've seen a lot of changes in law enforcement, especially in the U.S., and that's one of them, especially for our organization and our department, that the positive vices and the emphasis on your physical and mental and moral health are really supported and promoted by our executive staff is really aware, and so those things have changed. So I know that's a long answer, but it's a great question though.
No, it's a great question, and I think it doesn't matter if you're a sales director somewhere or a customer service team leader, or they're not as pressured. But then you go into emergency services, fire brigades, and things like this, and what I think I'm really hearing there is humans are humans. they have ways of coping, and the greater the stress and the immediacy of that stress, then it probably magnifies what maybe under normal circumstances wouldn't be a big deal. That, you know, takes it, you know, to an extreme. So there's something there about having well-rounded human beings that find a resilience and an anchor and a connection to things of value, be it your children, your spouse, whatever it is, that keep you focused, because you can't be maybe too self-indulgent if you're connected to other things. And yeah, there's a stability there. So that's I think,
yeah, that's a good point.
Definitely hearing that. So, you know, I'm hyper alert to time and the fact that, you know, you haven't got 3 days to talk to me, because that's what I want to do to you. So is, you know, talk to me about, you know, everybody's got their own journey, right? And we all get here by circuitous routes. I sometimes look back at how I got to where, you know, I am, wherever that is, and I think I'm not quite sure how that happened. But there are moments of influence. There are moments where I had to make a decision or whatever. And, you know, if you've got anything that you could say, do you know what, Guy, you know, this is part of maybe a pivotal moment and a narrative or a story in that would be of value to people to hear, because it'll probably, I'm sure it'll resonate with people in some way.
Yeah, the story I tell when we were talking earlier is my grandfather was very influential in my upbringing. He had a horse farm in South Texas and trained racehorses. And so I was really young when I started on my law enforcement journey. To back up a little bit, most native Texans somewhere in their lineage or history have a ranger relative. That when we talked earlier about the image and the appreciation and fondness Texans have for the Rangers, some of that's anchored in their history, because back in the late 1900s and 1800s, there's almost like an enlistment, like an army enlistment. So we've had a lot of Rangers come and go. So if you're a native Texan, likely you could search your history back and have a Ranger relative that served back in the 1800s or all the way back to I don't know how far we can trace our records back. I have a great grandfather that was a Ranger captain in 1855. And another Ranger, my great granddad was a Ranger, and his brother was a Ranger. And so that ties into my story. When I started law enforcement, I was really young. You mentioned the age thing and the maturity deal. And I was really young, and I went down the horse farm, and my granddad had finished training the horses, and he was wrapping things up. He got done around 11 o'clock. So I went down there, and I had my mind made up that I wasn't going to do law enforcement, that I was going to go work on the horse farm and learn how to train horses. And I really loved horse racing and thoroughbreds and quarter horse racing. I have a deep appreciation for it. I really am enthusiastic and really like that sport. But I went down there and talked to him, and I said, "Hey, Granddad, this law enforcement thing's not working out." And I said, "Why don't I just come here?" He was in his 70s at this time. And I said, "Look, you're going to want to step down. Why don't you train me to do the horse racing deal, and I'll take the farm over whenever you want to retire." And he looked down at the ground and just kind of shook his head. And I never really took stock of how proud he was for me to go to my first academy and try to be in law enforcement. And he said, "No," he said, "Why don't you just stick with it and get a job, and then try to get into DPS, which is our state police agency. And then you can test and be a Ranger like my dad," because his dad was a Ranger. And so I just remember looking at him like, "Are you kidding? I'm 23 years old. I can't even get my first job in law enforcement driving a patrol car. Like, how would I be a Ranger?" Like, that was such a far-fetched dream that he had for me. I was astonished, and I was mad. And it was, I think I talked to you earlier about that moment in time that I had no idea how his optimism and his belief in me would be the catalyst for something just unimaginable for me to accomplish in my lifetime. And both my grandparents lived to see me make Ranger. So he lived to see it happen. And I called him. I said, "Don't tell anybody." Of course, he told everybody. He was so proud. But I finished that story. When I tell that story, I teach a little bit at the college. Sometimes I tell them the problem with that story is someone else had to believe in my dreams, and what a travesty. And so I tell everybody that I come into contact with, I always keep it. He was such a perpetual optimist. Like my granddad, I guess training racehorses, you have to be, you have to see the good and what can happen here, because if you start thinking negative and you put that energy out in the world, it's going to come back and it's going to yield a negative result. So he was just always so optimistic and positive. And so I try to emulate that and pass that on. But the problem with that, I just always felt, I don't know, I want to say guilty, but a little, I look back and think, I wish I had a little more starch in my shirt back then and believed it myself, because when he said it, it was just such an astonishing statement. I'm like, come on. It's very hard to get into the department, period. I had to apply several times to get with the state police. It's a tough organization to measure up to and get into and thrive in. We have so much talent in our agency that it's very hard to thrive and distinguish yourself apart to continue to promote and get appointments. So anyway, the saving grace was they both, my grandmother and my grandfather lived to see. They were there at the promotion deal and all that. So
I love the fact that you went, don't tell anybody. Well, obviously I'm your grandpa. I'm going to tell everybody. Yeah.
Oh, he shouted it from the rooftops.
Yeah,
he was pretty excited about it.
I think I like the sense also that, you and maybe everybody in that role that inhabits that role, maybe just once in your career, somebody says something to you and you go, well, there's no reason. I'm not saying you can, but there's no reason why you can't. And maybe that phrase, maybe somebody stops you in a mall and, well, my 9-year-old wants to be a ranger. And, and he looks at you and he goes, can I be a ranger? And you go, I don't know, son, but if you want to be one, you can be. And who knows, in your lifetime, maybe that one of those girls goes on to be a ranger, right? Because the power of somebody who's older, that word sticking with them a certain time, I'm sure you've already said something to somebody that's already having an effect, but you just don't know that it is.
I can only hope.
Yeah.
But so go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so a couple of sort of finale questions for me. The young candidate or the young new starter looks up at you and goes, you've ridden this horse, for so long now. Any advice? What are the words that come out for somebody who says, any advice? What should I do? How do I make myself a success?
Wow, that's a deep question because it requires me to have some self-reflection, doesn't it? So I think really to go back to those vices, choose healthy vices. That, like you said, be the best version of yourself personally, and then that will resonate professionally. So really choose healthy vices, make good decisions. Don't be afraid to always improve yourself. My wife and I both went back in our 40s and finished our degrees. So I had college hours accumulated, but I never abandoned my self-development path and journey. So always try to learn something new and improve yourself. But really, I just think that always look at the glass as half full. Always be an optimist. Always trying to improve yourself. Choose a very healthy work-life balance. Don't let it consume you where you're one-dimensional. You just all work or either way, or you're all play and no work. You really have to have good balance in your life to make it, in this career, any career, 25, 30 years, who knows? And, we're living longer and retiring later in life. So you need the health and vitality to get there. And so I just think pace yourself and just be a good person, treat people the way you want to be treated. I talked about leadership bites. We haven't done much of that. I apologize. I haven't got a little more, a little more on all that, but I'd really have, you've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from good supervisors and bad supervisors. I've learned just as much from both. But I remember looking back at my career and thinking there's a few people that were just not good, not friendly, not helpful, maybe they lacked integrity, or they lacked some honesty and some appreciation for those around them. It's real easy in leadership to make it about you, and you're the most important guy, when in reality you're not. You're the least important guy. I tell you, I know I'm getting on a sidebar here, but the military, that I can tell my military guys, because they watch who eats last, and you can size a leader up pretty quick, who eats first and who eats last. When I'm at my functions and my meetings, invariably somebody will be on the phone or something, and I'll wait till everybody's done. I'll be the last guy, and then somebody will come in from outside and go through the line. It just kills me, because I do not want to eat first. I want to eat last. And so, just looking back, to pass that on, to answer your question, to pass on that philosophy and that vision of what it would take to succeed, I think, just to come full circle with what I'm trying to say, is just treat people the way you want to be treated. It's the golden rule. And I think if you do that, and have that good work-life balance, and always improve on yourself, and never abandon or jeopardize your integrity and your credibility. But you have to have that competence, always seek to refine and enhance your competence, and be a smart, because nobody wants to follow or put any faith into someone that's incompetent. So I value my competence, and I value how I've come by it with this deliberate effort on my part. So I would encourage someone to have a deliberate effort in developing their competence, because even like I said, with maybe the supervisor that's not real friendly or tough to work for, I could work for a competent, hard-nosed guy a lot quicker than I could work for an agreeable, nice, incompetent guy. So I think that competence goes, especially in my work with, like you said earlier, with the social media, and you're always being watched and analyzed. So just always put your most competent foot forward. And anyway, I kind of rambled on that, but
no, I love it, Wayne. And there's something there about discipline. It's almost, have discipline, monitor yourself, reflect on yourself, understand the impact. You are a ripple in the pond, right? And understand what that is when you walk into a room. And so there's something here about discipline and self-awareness, and just that monitoring and management of self, and having, maybe I think what I'm hearing there is conscious competence in that. Don't just think it just happens by accident, because it doesn't. Mm-hmm. So I think I heard that.
We're very lucky. Our leadership, especially in my division, we've had two, as of late, one was a company commander and a regional director, and then he was our chief. And then my chief now, they always make me feel like I'm the most important, even when I wasn't, and I'm still not, but they make me feel like I'm the most important guy in the room. We could have 100 people and all dignitaries, and they just have that connectivity, that personal connection it's inspiring. And I try to perpetuate that and take stock of that, how those men have made me feel about my potential, my contribution, my value. And I've tried to pass that on where others know and see that I recognize their value. I recognize their contribution and their value. It just is so important to, I've done that all ever since I was a lieutenant, as really a novice supervisor. I learned so many lessons, but one is the value and articulating someone's value is very powerful when it comes to motivation and connection and identity and getting them invested in the collective effort of the organization. So I know I'm rambling. That's a long story short.
No, you're not rambling at all. So listen, I'm going to bring us to a close just because of time, not because I want to. I've got to ask you just a personal note. I'm I've done some firearms training back in the day, and I'm fascinated by certain things. So you mentioned about personalized sidearms just right at the start, and I just remembered. I mean that some people have 6 shooters still. Are they? I mean, are they all? Is everybody an automatic, or are some people still carrying that kind of that look?
The wheel guns are kind of they're out. We don't. That's the revolver's called a wheel gun.
Nobody's still walking around with that. Right.
No, they kind of phased those out. We trained with those when I went to recruit school to be a trooper. That was what we trained a lot with those. It's the Ranger division is the only division in our state police that can pick their sidearm. It has to be above a caliber of 380. And so some like the 9mm, some like the 40, some like the 45. And the old adage, why do you carry a 45? It's because they don't make a 46. So, but it's a lot of the Rangers now, they do like the personalization that comes with that they can have whatever duty weapon that they feel the safest with to carry. And I'm a purist. I like the old Colts, the old pre-1970s, old 45s. And when we sign off, I'll send you a couple of pictures of what I carry, just so you can see that. That's my sidearm. But it's funny to come circle back again with what you said. When people notice me at a convenience store, they don't notice the badge or the hat first. They notice the gun, or a restaurant or whatever public place. They notice that pistol first, and it's an attention getter. I don't carry it for that, but
they probably also feel a bit safer as well. So that's a good thing.
Well, in Texas for sure. Yeah.
So listen, I'm going to press the stop button. Stay on the line. Don't disappear, because just want to chat to you when we're done. But just from me and anybody that's listening, just thank you so much for your time and investing that time. And it's been an absolute joy to speak to you. I think you just there's a transparency and a clarity and a kind of inbuilt integrity in you, which I imagine is representative of those that are around you as well. So I think you carry that well, and I recognize that. So thank you.
Thank you, Guy. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness, and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book, Living Brave Leadership, on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.